Hello, this is Arthur Bush, and you're listening to Radio Free Flint. Thanks for joining us today. Our guest today in this episode is Robert Segar, a retired Flint area lawyer who is well known for his work in civil rights. Mr. Segar was involved in a case, Butts versus Virginia, in which his advocacy before the United States Supreme Court resulted in the Virginia poll tax in 1966 being declared illegal. Poll tax, of course, was a relic of Jim Crow and voter suppression, attempting to keep African Americans from voting. Mr. Segar argued that case with former Supreme Court Justice, the late Thurgood Marshall, who at the time was the United States Solicitor General. Bob Segar attended Princeton University, the University of Michigan, as well as Wayne State University. He obtained his law degree from the University of Michigan and a master's degree in taxation from Wayne State University. He's practiced law in the Flint area for approximately 60 years with the law firm of Dean, Segar, Hart, and Schulman. That law firm is one of the premier civil rights practitioners in the state of Michigan. The law firm involved itself in a great number of unpopular clauses and worked extensively during the civil rights era to seek to undo the Jim Crow laws that had emerged after the Civil War. The group, some of the lawyers participated in marches in Mississippi for justice for African Americans. And Mr. Segar himself has been given many accolades for his work. He's highly regarded by the lawyers throughout our state and our country for his dedication and his professionalism. He's received accolades from the State Bar of Michigan, the Genesee County Bar of Michigan, just to name a couple. He is a champion of justice and has been named such by the State Bar of Michigan. I'm sure you'll enjoy this bit of Flint history and national history. Mr. Segar was kind enough to join us. He's retired with his wife now in Ann Arbor. Thank you for listening to Radio Free Flint. We took a little vacation. We're back. We hope that you will subscribe to our podcast, like us on Apple, Spotify, or any of your favorite platforms, and rate this podcast episode as to whether you like it. That helps us to know for future programming. If you'd like to communicate with us, please send us a note at radiofreeflint@gmail.com. Here we go. Here's Mr. Segar. Thank you for listening. And it's really a pleasure, and as I said earlier, an honor to have you, Robert. Thank you for joining Radio Free Flint.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, I want to get right into this because you're one of those guys that I don't know a lawyer in our region that doesn't have the highest respect for you. You've been given you've been given some awards that reflect that over your long career. Let's talk a little bit about where how you got to Flint, how long you were in Flint, and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, well, it was kind of by chance, but what happened is this. Both my father and my brother were doctors, MDs, and I assumed that I would end up doing that too when I was in a pre-medical course at the University of Michigan. But as it turned out, all of the courses involved in going into medicine, all the science courses like embryology and biology, I didn't like them, and I didn't do all that well in them either. So I finally decided at one point that it was silly for me to go on wanting to be a doctor when I didn't really enjoy that kind of work. I had to think what I was going to do. I wasn't going to be a doctor, and the only thing that was left was law school. And so I thought, well, I'll give it a try and see how it works out. And as it turned out, it was a very fortunate choice for me because it turned out to be a really good career and one that I found very enjoyable and very rewarding. It just that's what happened. I was by default, I guess that you say, went to law school as opposed to some other place.
Where were you raised at?
I was born in Detroit. Went to school in high school in Detroit, Mumford High School. stayed in Detroit, went to the University of Michigan after a year at Princeton, my freshman year, and then I went to University of Michigan for my undergraduate degree and then law school degree, also for Michigan. And when I got out of law school, I went to interview for jobs, and I went with a rather staid conservative law firm in Detroit, which has been out of existence for quite a while now. And I stayed there a couple of years, but I was really not happy because, like all youngish lawyers, I was given kind of the scut work to do. And after a couple of years, I was ready to try something else, something a little more sophisticated. I was in Flint doing some legal work, and I ran into an old friend from Detroit, a lawyer, and he asked me, after we chatted a while, he asked me if I was interested in coming to Flint to work. Well, at the time, I never dreamed that that's what would happen ultimately, but as it turns out, he took me to meet his partners. It was a small law firm, 5 or 6 lawyers at that time, and my wife and I liked it. They took us out for a Saturday's outing and restaurants, etc., and we liked the city, and we just decided to make the move, much to our own surprise, because we're not that adventuresome, but that's exactly what we did.
You went to the Ivy League school and then left to come back to Michigan.
Yes. I wasn't happy at Princeton, mostly because of the lack of social life there. At that time, it was an all-male school. It was just, there was no dating. Drinking was the big thing, and I wasn't a big drinker or any kind of a drinker, really. And so I just was unhappy there. Social life was absent.
Now, at the University of Michigan, you were an undergrad at U of M, and then you went to their law school.
Yes.
You got a specialty in tax. You got an advanced degree in tax law.
Right. Yes, I did get them after I was out practicing a few years in Flint. I did go back and get a master's at Wayne State University.
When you came to Flint, it was a much different place than it is today.
Yes, much bigger and thriving. I was going to mention that it was just a wonderful place. Wages were high, work was there, and for a young lawyer in particular starting out, it was a great place because the big law firms at that time weren't interested in sending people to Flint, lawyers to Flint to do work there. They would prefer any matter in Flint to a Flint lawyer, or not to a Flint lawyer, but to another lawyer. It was an exciting time in Flint at that time.
Obviously, that changed at some point. You went on to, your father, you said, was practicing medicine. Was that in Detroit?
Yeah, that was in Detroit. And my brother was a surgeon, a general surgeon. He was in Dayton, Ohio.
But you didn't have any relatives in Flint.
No, none. There's no question. It was a wonderful place for a young lawyer, maybe a young businessman, but certainly a young lawyer just hang out a shingle, as you said, and you could earn a good living right almost from the start. So it was a good place for that.
Tell us about the firm that you joined and describe some of the people that you worked with.
Okay, well, when we decided to move to Flint, much to our surprise, as I mentioned, I was with this firm. Actually, I think I was the 5th lawyer that they hired. And it was a very liberal firm as opposed to the first firm I worked for in Detroit, which was very staid and conservative. But this Flint firm was very active in civil rights. And there's some interesting stories about that. We went to Mississippi. In fact, maybe 2 of them did at that time. It's been a long time. To march in the civil rights marches and to do other things having to do with civil rights. Our firm was very active in that regard. And I'm sure we'll get into it later on that I received the rare chance to participate in a case in the U.S. Supreme Court involving the civil rights issue having to do with poll taxes down south. Other partners of mine, as I mentioned, were going to Mississippi. And I want to say that going to Mississippi in those days to do civil rights work was a dangerous undertaking. Really, it was. We all know about Emmett Till and lots of other people who had problems there. That part of it, we were very active, and it was a pleasure to be involved with the firm.
Max Steen was involved in as I was told, in some kind of representation involving people that were hauled before the Senator McCarthy's committee when he was investigating communists.
Right. Well, this was shortly before I got up to Flint and started working there. There were two lawyers in Flint who had been together in law schools as students, and they and did things like, as I said, go to Mississippi, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, Max, you mentioned Max Dean's name, but Max Dean and Mort Leeson were the two that were together as students. They did lots of things. One of them was they signed a petition for saving the Rosenbergs. You may remember alleged Russian agents, but people felt they didn't get a fair trial and they were sentenced to death. And people who were activists who were concerned about justice, et cetera, thought that they should get another chance, that the trial wasn't fair, the judge wasn't fair. So they signed a petition saying some of these things. And it somehow got into the hands of the McCarthy hearing. People don't, and today a lot of people may not remember that, but there was a communist scare and there were blacklists out in Hollywood, California. If anybody ever thought you might have breathed the leftist breath, you could be accused. It was like witches, I guess you'd say. It was like a witch hunt. And so anyway, the two lawyers in my firm that I'm talking about were called before the Un-American Activities Committee from Washington.
For the sake of posterity, explain, Bob, what the National Lawyers Guild was, because you were active with them, and what was their importance not only in the 60s and the civil rights movement, but what's their importance in general?
Well, it was, as I said, it was a law firm. There's no question about that. That's what it was. But it was extremely, what would be called in those days, left wing or liberal, and they took on cases. There was the National Lawyers Guild, and then there was a subgroup called the Committee to Assist Southern Lawyers. And what those lawyers did in that committee, they volunteered to handle cases down south, both lawsuits and just doing legal work for Southern lawyers, because for the Southern lawyers down, it was not very healthy if you were a Southern lawyer trying to help a civil rights matter the way the atmosphere was down there. We got a call one day from Ernie Goodman, who was a star civil rights attorney in the Michigan area and beyond, actually. And our firm was asked if we would be willing to handle a civil rights case on a volunteer basis. And we jumped at the chance.
You were helping Southern lawyers because often they would become blacklisted, is what I understood.
Yeah, right.
Well, what I understood was that there was a great need for civil rights litigators. And these people that were lawyers in some of these communities just couldn't do that for a lot of reasons, not the least of which they'd be blacklisted or, bothered by bar associations and so forth. Is that the way it worked?
Yeah, yes. And that's the way it worked. And there were, of course, was local counsel. This case was involved the poll tax, which is an old
the one you worked on did, but guys like Max Dean and others, they worked on a lot of other issues, didn't they?
Oh, well, yeah, there was a lot of other civil rights besides the poll tax, but most of their work was, as far as I can recall right now, had to do with similar kinds of things. Although I know Max spent some time in the law office, actually in the law office down in Virginia, helping lawyers out there. And now they were also involved in other matters, as you might guess. That was during the Vietnam War, and or after, maybe the Vietnam War was afterwards, but they were much involved in that, particularly Max.
And then eventually what happened was you got involved in a case in Virginia, which was called the Evelyn Butts case.
Right.
That case was one of the most significant of the civil rights cases. There was a whole period of time where you had Board versus Brown of Education in the 50s. And then there became quite a bit of litigation over Jim Crow laws, basically.
Right.
So,
right.
So let's talk about the Evelyn Butts case. How did you get involved in it? And just tell us how it played out, because it's quite an exciting story.
Well, as I mentioned, it was the poll tax case, or the Butts case, which we got involved in. We were asked if we would be willing to contribute our services, which, as I said, we kind of jumped at the chance. And the poll tax was simply a voter suppression issue that came into being after Reconstruction in the Civil War. And what it was essentially was a fee for voting, that if you hadn't paid your poll tax case, you couldn't vote. You were automatically disqualified. And it was kind of a sham. I mean, lawyers or the government in Virginia didn't really want to collect this tax or this fee, so they was discouraged. But then when people hadn't paid it and tried to vote, they wouldn't be allowed to vote. So it was just you're right, a Jim Crow or voter suppression kind of laws.
It was targeted basically in its simplest terms to keep African Americans from voting.
Absolutely, yeah. And it was clear from its history that that's what it was. It was what it was supposed to do. And the same statute, this Virginia law, which we were involved in, had been attacked before on a civil rights basis back in the 1930s, I think around 1935. And the U.S. Supreme Court at that time denied that there was anything wrong with it and found against the plaintiffs in that case. But it was a different time when I got involved in it in the 1960s. Actually, case was brought, I believe, in 1965 and decided, I think, in 1966. So that involved getting involved in a lawsuit in Virginia with a law firm, having a local law firm down there. And we brought the case in the United States District Court. And we lost in the United States District Court very quickly, didn't take any time at all. But we appealed. And at that time, there was a direct appeal from to the U.S. Supreme Court in certain civil rights cases. And you could get into the court then, because most cases from the U.S. Supreme Court are only by the agreement of the court to hear them, and they handle very few cases. And I might say that it's, as a lawyer, it's kind of the holy grail of getting to argue a case before the U.S. Supreme Court. Very, very few lawyers ever get to do that, because most of the time the cases that go to the court are cases that are significant, and if it's not significant for some reason, the court is not going to listen to it. But the poll tax case, you're right, was an important case because the poll tax was an important impediment to a lot of people to voting. It was the only one. There were other kinds of voter suppression, but we just happened to get involved in the poll tax. And we appealed, as I mentioned, and we argued the case. I actually argued the case in Washington, in the Supreme Court. The local lawyer, they're down there by the name of Jim Jordan or Joe Jordan, was given a right to argue 5 minutes. You're allowed a half hour or 40 minutes to argue before the court, and then you can reserve time to argue if you want to and rebuttal. And that's what we did. And so the last 5 minutes of the case was argued by the local lawyer in Virginia.
You were involved in that case, standing in front of the Supreme Court of the United States, and on your side. What was it like to listen to that argument?
Well, it was, I can just say it was kind of a once in a lifetime chance, and it was very exciting. I was a little nervous, I won't deny that, but managed to get through that all right. And then, they took the case under advisement after the oral argument, and they weren't quite as rough with me as I thought they might have been. When I say rough, I mean, you have to go through a lot of questions and answers to the court, to the judges. And I expected to be quizzed, I think, a little bit more taxing than I no pun intended that I was. But there were people from the New York Times and Time Magazine, and it was just, it was an important matter.
Do you recall who the Chief Justice was at the time?
It was Warren, Governor Warren, former governor of California. He was a Republican, and he'd been appointed by Republican president.
Eisenhower.
Yeah, Eisenhower. Eisenhower was very disappointed because Warren became the big chief lawyer, civil rights litigation cases, and I think it was always said that Warren was quite disappointed. Not Warren. Eisenhower was quite disappointed that the pick he made to the court.
What was the reaction to this by people back in Flint?
Well,
to your involvement in such a thing?
That's really interesting. You should ask that question because the Flint Journal was the newspaper in those days in Flint, and when this case decision came out, there was publicity gone, as I said, in New York Times, Time Magazine. There wasn't 1 inch of print in the Flint Journal. They never even had an article about my being in the case. So
I got to tell you how they felt about it, right, Bob?
Yeah. I mean, as I said, they were literally headlines, and of course, I was proud and pleased with all that. But I always couldn't understand how the local guy makes good, etc. That didn't mention the cases. I recall now. I'm going back a lot of years, 30 or 40 or 50 years, whatever it was. But
what was the final result?
The final result was that case. And I should say there's another case that was involved, that was consolidated with it. They tried together, but there was the same case or cases really. But that ended the poll tax case, or the poll taxes in the South. There were 5 states that still had it hanging over from civil rights days. They were all no good after that, invalid. And so they show you how things change.
Yeah, for sure. What was the vote of the court?
6-3.
Let me share this with you, just for old time's sake. Bob and I are both alumni of the Supreme Court case. So Bob and I both have appeared in front of the Supreme Court in the history of our county. Bob's case obviously was, in my opinion, a lot more important than mine. My experience with the Flint Journal was exactly the same as yours. I was all jazzed about winning this case. I won 9-0, and it was a murder case. It was a gang-related case at a school in a Flint area, Hamady High School. And the issue was it had to do with double jeopardy and some other stuff. And the Flint Journal put my victory on like the backside of the 3rd page or some stuff like this.
As it happens, I was actually quoted in Time Magazine by a reporter that had been at the argument. And I always thought that was a pretty big deal. We had a lot of interesting cases, and I think any lawyer that does trial work will have a lot of interesting cases. And then they may not be all would be involve $1 million, but even a small case from an economic standpoint can have just the same fascinating legal issues as others. Yeah, I had a lot of interesting cases. One of the things I liked about trial law and litigation in general was that it gave you a chance to be creative and to think up pretty novel ideas. And when that happened in a particular case that many lawyers wouldn't have wanted anything to do with, and when you won, and instead of the facts, I guess you'd say, that gave you a lot of satisfaction, a lot of enjoyment out of that.
But eventually you got to doing some alternative dispute resolution.
Mediation, yeah, right.
And how did you get into that, and what were your feelings about it?
I was and remain a big fan of alternative dispute resolution or mediation, and that's a process whereby lawyers or non-lawyers for that matter, or both, try and talk to both sides of a case and kind of grease the skids a little bit, in compromising on the particular case. In any event, it's alternative dispute, alternative to going to court is what it means, and lots of cases got settled without mediation, I don't think ever would have had a chance to be settled. But because, people take posture about their position and the other side's position. And when the third person comes in, the mediator, he can listen to both sides, or she can listen to both sides, and kind of guess it just help things along and smooth them out. And now they don't doesn't settle every case, but
Now, how many years have you practiced law?
well, the first year would have been in 1960, so I guess it's somewhere between 50 and 60, I think.
50 and 60 years.
Yeah.
Now, you during your storied career were given some awards, some prestigious awards. One was by the State Bar of Michigan for being a champion of justice.
Yes, I was really proud to have that. It's very significant to me.
Yeah. How did you get that award? I mean, what was that all about?
Well, of course, I wasn't on the panel that chose the people that were going to get it, but if I got to be honest about it, I would say it probably had something to do with the poll tax case. I worked in the poll tax case was what I think got me that award. But I'm glad to accept it.
You've received other awards as well, one of which is one that most people don't know much about. And that's an award named after a fella named Herb Milliken, an attorney in Flint.
Yeah, I was going to mention Herb too. He was a wonderful lawyer, and it wouldn't matter whether he was in Flint or New York or London. He was revered, I think I can say, by the local lawyers, local bar association. And he was, aside from being just a wonderful, wonderful lawyer, he was a very personal guy, very nice guy, and so much so that they named an award for him. It's the Herb Milliken Civil Rights Award, I think it's called.
Civility
Award, yeah. And so that was for a lawyer every year who was determined to represent the ideals of that Herb Milliken did. And so, yeah, that was something that was very exciting to me too.
And the Bar Association awarded that to you. The Genesee County Bar Association awarded that to you for the consensus of the lawyers was that you did represent the ideals of the profession in the best of ways.
Well, right. Thank you.
Well, in light of that award, and in light of Herb Milliken, we have a room in the courthouse that's named after him, and it's a mediation room where people do try to civilly resolve their matters. The law profession and the society has changed significantly since the 60s and 70s and even the 80s. I wanted to ask you, what do you think about the legal profession now and how cases are handled? And, what's your overall view of this?
Well,
there's some people that say we've taken up entertainment as part of the job description.
things are so different. I mean, the technology is so different that it's hard to compare eras. The Genesee County Bar Association, I always found to be a very, very good organization. And the Flint lawyers, Genesee County lawyers, are always proud of the fact that if the lawyer gave you his word about something, a handshake would seal it without anything further needed. The lawyers were very collegial, they were friendly with each other. There was a lot of socialization. They had the golf stag annually. They had secretaries put on something called Boss's Night once a year. So it was just a nice place, a very nice place to practice law. And as I said, my choice to go into law turned out to be just luckily, a very good choice for me.
Now, just kind of wind up here. One of the things that happened to you and I again, besides we represented two prostitutes in a case against the city of Flint, and actually won some money for them. I ended up with you wasn't the end of my career, but you said it was the last case you were going to handle in the Michigan Supreme Court one day. And we were on opposite sides of the case. Do you remember that case?
I think I do. You have to give me the name.
It was Moore, Clarence Moore.
Yes, I remember that case now very well.
Now, you've argued, as I have, in front of the Michigan Supreme Court, but I suspect you've argued there more than I did. What did you think of that court itself and your activity there?
The Michigan Supreme Court?
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't terribly impressed with the Michigan Supreme Court. I don't want to sound, I don't know, maybe it's presumptuous of me to say that, but of course there are individuals that were capable and qualified, but my understanding is that it did not have a very good reputation, and that was the Michigan court. In other appellate courts, or some of them, but
the level of decorum is missing. If you've been in the United States Supreme Court and then you go to the Michigan Supreme Court, it's pretty obvious the difference, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, the U.S. Supreme Court is just in the class by itself. And someday, I didn't remember that someday I'm going to talk to you about the Clarence Moore case, because we lost and I thought we should have won.
Well, I told my friends if I did that case 10 times, I'd lose 9. So I won it 4-3. And even one of the Republicans voted against me. So I couldn't believe it. First of all, I couldn't believe that you were on the other side of me, given all the, from the very first days when you and your firm taught me how to do depositions. I couldn't believe this was happening. But anyway, just so the fans out there know, this was a case that involved a boy and his brother, and they were down by Thread Lake, not too far from where I grew up. And one was encouraging the other to shoot the gun, and they shot. The boy shot and killed another man in some kind of beef they had. And it got to be a technical issue about the possession of a firearm during a felony. And I probably should have lost that case, but it sure in the hell isn't the lawyer in every case, that's for sure. That's what I learned over the years, that the lawyers, and I'm sure you share this, I mean, the lawyers are important to a case, but it's the issues involved in the case that are more important than us.
Right, no question about that. And I also say I learned that the most important thing in the cases and getting them decided was not the law, but the facts. It was the facts where there were always a problem in cases. Law, you can usually decide pretty much usually what the law is or should be, but the facts that gave you problems in cases.
Exactly. Well, Robert Segar, I enjoyed meeting up with you again and listening to some of your viewpoints and your stories. And I wish you the best of health. And I hope again that I can meet up with you soon.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a real pleasure. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care, Bob.
Okay, you too, Art.
Well, thank you. That concludes our episode for today. We hope you enjoyed listening to Robert Segar and his stories about the historic Evelyn Butts case in the United States Supreme Court. It documents the Flint law firm of Dean, Segar, Hart, and Schulman, as well as Robert's adventures in doing various civil rights cases through the years, and shows that Flint, Michigan is a place where national class talent is born and practices law, the arts, many other of the professions. The introductory song that you heard earlier was by Ajay Duvakat of Boston, Massachusetts, a folk singer who sang the song Flint, Michigan, a song that she wrote and composed. The next song you're going to hear on the way out is by singer-songwriter Barb Barton of Lansing, Michigan, a song she composed with a local choir called Water. Thanks for listening to Radio Free Flint. We hope to have you join us next time. Goodbye.